I never thought I'd be sitting here, typing out this twisted story about my wife, MIA, and the day she dropped a bombshell on our marriage. We'd been married for 3 years, 3 good years, or so I thought. We had a kid together, a beautiful little boy named Aiden, who was 2. I'm Eric, 34, a project manager for a software company. MIA, 31, works as a marketing consultant. She's always been the more outgoing one. The one with a million friends, always networking, always busy. I thought that was just who she was. I never questioned it. Maybe I should have. It was a Wednesday night, and I was just getting home from a long day at work. My commute felt longer than usual, the stress of managing a big project weighing on me. As I walked through the front door, I could hear the familiar sound of MIA's voice in the kitchen, talking to someone on the phone, laughing. At first, it seemed normal. She's always had these animated conversations with her friends. But when I heard her say, "Yeah, I'll bring it up to him tonight," my stomach dropped. Something in her tone, something too casual, made me uneasy. She saw me enter and quickly hung up the phone, flashing that same smile she always did when she was hiding something. I shrugged it off at first, thinking maybe it was just another work thing. I'd learned not to pry into her job too much. After all, we both needed our space, right? But then, after dinner, she sat me down in the living room. That's when she started to say the words that would change our marriage forever. "Eric, I've been thinking, maybe we should try something different." I laughed, thinking she was talking about a vacation or a new hobby. "Yeah? What kind of different?" "I'm serious," she continued, her voice low but firm. "I've been talking to some of my friends, and they've tried this thing where they open their marriage, for a short time. Just to explore, try something new." My heart stopped. "Open our marriage?" The words barely came out. I was frozen in my seat. "Just for 2 weeks," she said quickly, as if that would somehow make it better. "Just to see how it feels, no pressure. It could help us reconnect, spice things up." Reconnect, spice things up? My mind was spinning. We had a kid together. We had a life together. How the hell did we get to the point where she was suggesting this? I looked at her, trying to understand. MIA was still the woman I fell in love with, or at least she looked like her, the long brown hair she always played with when she was nervous, the way she tilted her head when she was trying to convince me of something. But this wasn't the woman I married. "Are you serious, MIA? An open marriage? Just like that?" I couldn't help but laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was the most absurd thing I'd ever heard. She bit her lip and nodded. "It's just 2 weeks, Eric. And we set the rules. We don't have to talk about it afterward. We just try it. No strings attached." I was in disbelief. This wasn't some sitcom episode or a joke among friends over drinks. This was my wife, the mother of my child, casually asking to sleep with someone else as if it were no big deal. I should have been furious. I should have stormed out, told her no way in hell. But instead, I sat there, numb, my mind racing. Why would she want this? Was it me? Was I not enough? And why now, after 3 years? I stayed silent for a while, trying to process it all. She could tell I wasn't on board, at least not yet. So she leaned in, her hand resting on mine, as if that would calm me down. "Look, Eric, I know it sounds crazy, but think about it. It could be good for us. We've been in a routine, the same old thing every day. Maybe this will give us a chance to see things differently." I looked at her, not knowing what to say. I wanted to scream, to tell her this wasn't the solution, that we didn't need this kind of break to fix whatever she thought was wrong with our marriage. But at the same time, a small voice in the back of my head whispered something darker. Maybe she's already done something. Maybe she's just asking to make herself feel better about it. That thought gripped me harder than anything she'd said. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of thinking I'd be that nice guy who rolled over and accepted this. No. If she wanted an open marriage, I'd play the game. I'd let her think she was in control. After what felt like an eternity, I finally spoke. "Fine, if that's what you really want." Her eyes widened, a mix of surprise and relief. "Really? Yeah. But remember, MIA, you asked for this." Her smile faltered just a bit, but she quickly recovered, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "I knew you'd understand." I didn't say another word. I just nodded and stood up, heading to our bedroom to put Aiden to sleep. My mind was buzzing with thoughts, but one thing was clear: if MIA wanted to play this game, I was going to win. And that's how it all started, the beginning of the end. She had no idea what was coming. Neither did I. I thought agreeing to MIA's insane idea would bring clarity, but instead, it unleashed something I hadn't expected, a burning sense of betrayal that simmered under the surface, quietly pushing me into darker thoughts. For days after our conversation, I went through the motions of life as if nothing had changed. I went to work, handled Aiden's bedtime routine, and kept up with the usual small talk with MIA. But in the back of my mind, I was consumed by her offer. The agreement was simple: 2 weeks of freedom. We had set ground rules. No one would bring their new partners home. No one would mention the details of what they were doing. And after 2 weeks, we'd stop. Clean break. That was the deal. But as I sat there, pretending to be okay with everything, I realized how ridiculous it was. MIA's smile in those early days of our open marriage was unbearable, like she'd somehow tricked me into accepting her infidelity. The worst part, I wasn't sure if she had someone lined up or if this was just her floating the idea out of curiosity. I didn't know what hurt more, her eagerness or the fact that I might have been the last to know. It started with subtle changes. MIA suddenly had more evening work meetings, longer coffee dates with her friends, and unexplained absences during the weekend. When I'd ask where she was, she'd shrug and say, "Just grabbing a drink with a friend," in that same casual tone, as if everything were normal. And maybe, on the surface, it was. After all, I had agreed to this madness, hadn't I? But I wasn't just going to sit back and wait. If this was a game, I had my own strategy. It was the 4th night after our agreement when I decided I'd had enough of playing the clueless husband. MIA had been out for a few hours, supposedly meeting one of her friends for drinks. I didn't believe it. Not anymore. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. I know, it sounds like something out of a bad movie, but at that moment, it felt like the only way to regain control. I needed to know the truth, no matter how ugly it was. And if she was already seeing someone behind my back, then I wanted proof. I reached out to a guy I knew through work, Steve, a no-nonsense pie who had a reputation for digging up dirt in the corporate world. He was expensive, but discreet, which was exactly what I needed. I didn't want to confront MIA without knowing for sure what she was up to. The arrangement was simple. Steve would tail her discreetly for the next few days, capture any suspicious behavior, and report back to me. Meanwhile, I'd continue pretending like everything was fine, all while planning my next move. The truth came faster than I expected. It was the 2nd night of Steve's surveillance when I got the call. "Eric, you're not going to like this." Steve's voice was gruff, almost apologetic. "She's seeing someone. Guy's in his mid-30s, drives a black Audi, works in real estate." The confirmation hit me like a punch to the gut, even though I'd suspected it. "You're sure?" "I've got photos. They were at a bar together last night, and it didn't look like business. I'll send you everything." I stared at my phone after the call ended, my mind racing. This wasn't just a fantasy or some playful experiment for MIA. She was already involved with someone. Probably had been for a while. My stomach churned as the photos came through, a series of shots of MIA at a bar, sitting next to a guy I didn't recognize. He was tall, clean-cut, wearing one of those slim-fit suits that screamed money. They were close, too close. In one of the pictures, his hand was resting on her lower back, and she didn't seem to mind. I clenched my fists, feeling the anger rise inside me. This was more than just exploring for MIA. She had someone waiting in the wings, and she'd used our so-called open marriage as an excuse to make it legitimate. That's when the idea hit me. If she wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. While MIA was out playing her game, I was going to play mine. And this time, I wasn't going to sit on the sidelines. I wasn't interested in just sleeping with someone else for revenge. No, that felt too simple, too predictable. If MIA thought she could manipulate me, she had another thing coming. I needed to turn the tables on her. Enter Rachel. Rachel was an old flame, someone I dated briefly in college. We hadn't spoken in years, but she had recently moved back into town, and we had connected on Facebook. I knew from our casual online chats that she was single and doing well for herself, working as a successful interior designer. We'd shared a few nostalgic memories, but nothing serious. Until now. I sent her a message that afternoon, something innocent to start. "Hey, it's been a while. Want to grab coffee sometime?" She responded within minutes. "I'd love to. It's been way too long. How about this weekend?" Perfect. I didn't waste any time setting up our coffee date, but in the back of my mind, I knew where this was heading. I wasn't going to hold back. If MIA wanted an open marriage, I was about to show her just how open it could be. The weekend arrived, and as luck would have it, MIA had plans with friends again. Aiden was with my parents for the day, so I had the perfect opportunity. I met Rachel at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place we used to hang out in during our college days. When she walked in, it was like no time had passed. She was even more beautiful than I remembered, dark hair, confident smile, and the same easygoing charm that had drawn me to her all those years ago. "Eric, it's so good to see you," she said, hugging me as we sat down. Her voice had that familiar warmth, like slipping into a comfortable old sweater. We talked for hours, reminiscing about our college days, our lives since then, and catching up on all the things we'd missed. I was careful not to bring up MIA or the mess my marriage had become. This wasn't about venting. This was about something else entirely. As the conversation flowed, I noticed the familiar spark between us, the kind of chemistry that doesn't fade with time. Rachel laughed at my jokes, her eyes lingering on mine a little longer than they should. The tension between us was electric. By the time we finished our second cup of coffee, there was no mistaking what was happening. This wasn't just a casual catch-up. We both knew where this was headed, and neither of us seemed eager to stop it. We ended up back at her apartment later that afternoon. I won't go into details, but let's just say the open marriage MIA had so casually suggested, I was embracing it in full. As I left Rachel's place later that evening, I felt a strange sense of victory. I wasn't sure if it was because I had crossed a line I never thought I would, or because I finally felt like I was in control of something again. MIA had pushed me into this situation, but now I was pushing back. But as I walked through the door of my house, the reality of what I had done started to sink in. MIA was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, as if everything were perfectly normal. She glanced up at me with a smile. "Hey, how was your day?" I smiled back, keeping my expression neutral. It was good. Little did she know, this game was just getting started. By the end of that first week, I felt like I was living in two separate worlds. In one, I was the dutiful husband and father, going about my life as if nothing had changed. I'd make breakfast for Aiden, kiss MIA on the cheek before work, and pretend like everything was fine. In the other world, I was someone entirely different, a man who had crossed a line and found himself trapped in a tangled web of secrets, revenge, and regret. Rachel and I didn't stop after that first time. In fact, we met up 3 more times that week, each encounter feeling more reckless than the last. There was something intoxicating about it all. With Rachel, I could forget about MIA and her betrayals. I could forget about the open marriage disaster and the man she was sneaking off to see. When I was with Rachel, I was in control, at least, that's what I told myself. But deep down, I knew this was a ticking time bomb. MIA had no idea what I was up to, or so I thought. Her behavior remained largely the same, still disappearing 4 hours at a time, still coming home late with vague explanations about meeting friends or working late. I didn't ask too many questions. We were both playing our parts in this twisted charade, pretending everything was okay when, in reality, it was anything but. I had Steve, the private investigator, keep tabs on MIA throughout that second week. His updates came in daily, and they all told the same story. MIA was still seeing the same guy, the real estate agent. His name, I learned, was Jason Connors. The more I found out about him, the more enraged I became. This wasn't just some fling for MIA. Jason had been in the picture 4 months, long before she proposed the open marriage idea. That revelation hit me harder than anything else. MIA hadn't suggested an open marriage because she was curious or bored. She did it because she already had one foot out the door. The idea of her sneaking around behind my back while I was at work, while I was taking care of our son, infuriated me. She was using me, manipulating me, and she thought I was too blind to see it. I wasn't blind anymore. The twist came one Friday evening. I was in the kitchen making dinner when MIA walked in with a strange expression on her face. It was a mix of guilt and apprehension, like she was about to say something she didn't want to. I braced myself, knowing that whatever was coming, it wasn't good. "Eric," she began, her voice softer than usual, "can we talk?" I nodded, keeping my hands busy with the cutting board. "Sure. What's up?" She shifted nervously, leaning against the counter. "I've been thinking about this whole open marriage thing." I froze for a split second, then resumed chopping vegetables, not wanting to give her the satisfaction of knowing I cared. "Yeah? What about it?" MIA hesitated, glancing down at her hands. "I don't think it's working out the way I thought it would." My heart pounded in my chest, but I kept my tone neutral. "Why's that?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know. It's just, I thought this would help us, you know? I thought it would bring something new to our marriage, but it feels like it's pushing us further apart." "Oh, now she's having second thoughts," I thought bitterly, holding back a sarcastic remark. Instead, I simply said, "That's interesting." She looked up, frowning at my lack of response. "Aren't you feeling the same way?" I shrugged. I don't know, MIA. You're the one who wanted this. Her face fell, and for a moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered Jason Connors and the fact that she had been seeing him 4 months behind my back. My sympathy quickly evaporated. MIA stepped closer, her eyes pleading. I think we should end it. This experiment or whatever you want to call it. I don't want to do this anymore. My grip tightened on the knife, and I set it down on the counter, turning to face her fully. You don't want to do this anymore? I repeated, my voice low and controlled. She shook her head. No, I don't. I've realized that what we have is more important than. I cut her off. How long, MIA? She blinked, confused. What? How long have you been seeing him? I asked, my voice sharper now. Her eyes widened, and she took a step back. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. I took a step forward, my patience wearing thin. How long have you been seeing Jason? The color drained from her face, and her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Eric, how long, MIA? I demanded, my voice rising. She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. A few months, she whispered. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me, even though I already knew the answer. Hearing her admit it out loud made it real in a way that nothing else had. This wasn't just some stupid fling, this was an affair, a long-term betrayal, and she had lied to my face about it. You've been seeing him 4 months, I repeated, the anger boiling up inside me. And you thought an open marriage would fix that? MIA shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. I don't know. I was confused, Eric. You thought what? That you could have your cake and eat it too? I spat. That you could sleep with him and still come home to me like nothing happened? Her tears spilled over, and she covered her face with her hands. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. I should have felt something, anger, sadness, betrayal, but instead, I just felt numb. The woman standing in front of me, the mother of my child, had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and now she was crying, asking for forgiveness. But forgiveness wasn't what I had in mind. You're sorry, I said, my voice cold. You're sorry now that I know the truth. But were you sorry when you were sneaking around with him 4 months? Were you sorry when you suggested an open marriage so you could sleep with him without feeling guilty? She sobbed harder, shaking her head. I never meant for it to go this far. I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed through the kitchen. You never meant for it to go this far? MIA, you've been lying to me 4 months. How far did you think this would go? She didn't answer, just stood there, crying into her hands. The sight of her, so broken and vulnerable, should have made me feel something, but it didn't. I was too far gone for that. Too hurt, too angry, too betrayed. For a moment, the room was silent except for her sobs. I could hear Aiden playing in the living room, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in the kitchen. I thought about him, about what this would mean for him. He didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this mess, but there was no avoiding it now. This was our reality, and there was no going back. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing thoughts. I need some air, I muttered, turning away from MIA and heading for the front door. I couldn't be in the same room with her right now. Not after everything I had just learned. Eric, wait, please, she called after me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face, and I let out a long breath, trying to calm the storm of emotion swirling inside me. My mind was racing with a million thoughts, but one thing was clear, I couldn't let MIA off the hook for this. She had betrayed me, and there had to be consequences. But as I stood there, staring out into the darkened street, another thought crept into my mind, Rachel. She didn't know anything about what was going on. To her, our fling was just a fun, carefree distraction. She had no idea about the mess I was dealing with at home, and part of me wanted to keep it that way. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was digging myself into a deeper hole. I was no better than MIA at this point. We were both playing games, both lying, both hiding things from each other. And the longer this went on, the more damage it would do, not just to us, but to Aiden as well. Something had to give. I spent the entire night outside, pacing back and forth on the front porch, staring out into the dark. The cool air did nothing to calm the storm brewing inside me. The reality of everything that had unfolded over the past 2 weeks weighed heavily on my chest. I thought about MIA, her lies, her affair with Jason Connors, and how she'd manipulated me into this open marriage to cover her tracks. I thought about Rachel, who had no idea she was just a pawn in this twisted game of revenge. And then, most painfully, I thought about Aiden, my son, caught in the middle of all of this. He didn't deserve this. He didn't deserve parents who were so caught up in their own egos and betrayals that they forgot about what really mattered, him. The guilt gnawed at me, making me question everything I had done. Was I any better than MIA? Had I let my anger and pride push me to the point of no return? As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, I knew I couldn't keep this charade going any longer. Something had to change, and it had to change now. I went back inside, tiptoeing around the house like a ghost. MIA had fallen asleep on the couch, her tear-streaked face pale in the early morning light. She looked peaceful, vulnerable even, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But that guilt was quickly replaced by the cold, hard reality of what she had done. Her lies, her betrayal, and her selfishness had shattered the life we'd built together. I couldn't forgive her, not now, maybe not ever. But I also couldn't keep dragging this out. It wasn't fair to any of us, especially Aiden. I needed a plan, a way out of this mess, but I couldn't think clearly with her still in the house. I picked up my phone and dialed the only person who had seen through my calm exterior over the past few days, Steve, the private investigator. He answered on the second ring. "Eric, I take it you've made a decision." "I have," I replied, my voice hoarse from the sleepless night. "I need your help." Steve didn't ask any unnecessary questions. He knew the score, knew exactly what MIA had been up to, and had watched her movements for long enough to understand what needed to happen next. "All right, what do you need?" "I want to get Jason involved. I know he's the reason behind all this, and I want MIA to face the full weight of her decisions," I said, gripping the phone tightly. "I want her to feel the consequences." Steve paused for a moment. "I can arrange that. I've got enough evidence to confront him. But, Eric, are you sure this is the route you want to take?" I hesitated. Was I sure? Did I want to expose her affair in the most brutal way possible, forcing her to choose between the man she betrayed me with and the family we'd built together? I wasn't sure about anything anymore, but what I did know was that I couldn't let this slide. If I let her off the hook now, it would haunt me for the rest of my life. "Yes," I said finally, "I'm sure." The next evening, everything was set. Steve had tracked down Jason's schedule, and I knew exactly where he would be. It was time for a confrontation. I didn't tell MIA where we were going, only that we needed to talk about something important, and she reluctantly agreed. We drove in silence, the tension thick between us. She kept glancing at me, as if waiting for me to say something, but I stayed focused on the road. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional soft breathing from Aiden in the backseat. I'd arranged for my sister to pick him up as soon as we dropped him off. This confrontation wasn't something I wanted him anywhere near. Finally, we pulled up to Jason's office, a sleek, modern real estate building with glass windows that shimmered under the streetlights. MIA's confusion turned to panic as she realized where we were. "Eric, what's going on? Why are we here?" she asked, her voice trembling. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I parked the car and turned to face her, my expression unreadable. "We're here because you have something you need to face, MIA. Something you've been hiding for months." Her eyes widened in fear, and she quickly glanced out the window, as if considering making a run for it. "Eric, I don't understand." "You do understand," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Jason, the affair. You've been lying to me for months, and now it's time for the truth." MIA's face turned ghostly white. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For a moment, I thought she might faint. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she whispered, "How did you know?" "I've known for weeks," I said, my eyes narrowing. "But the real question is, how long were you going to keep lying? How long were you going to keep this open marriage going while you snuck off to see him?" Tears welled up in her eyes again, but I wasn't moved by them this time. "Eric, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." "Stop," I interrupted. "I don't want your apologies anymore. I want you to face the consequences of what you've done." Before she could respond, I got out of the car and walked around to the passenger side. I opened her door and motioned for her to get out. She hesitated, looking like she might refuse, but eventually, she stepped out, her legs shaky beneath her. Together, we walked toward the building, the tension between us unbearable. As we approached the entrance, I saw Jason standing inside, leaning against the front desk. He looked up as we entered, his face instantly contorting into shock and confusion when he saw MIA beside me. "Eric, MIA, what's going on?" Jason stammered, clearly caught off guard. MIA's hands trembled at her sides, and she couldn't meet his gaze. I stepped forward, the anger I had been holding in for so long bubbling to the surface. "What's going on, Jason, is that you've been screwing my wife behind my back for months, and now it's time to face the music." Jason's face went pale, and he took a step back. Eric, man, it's not like that. Save it, I snapped. I don't want to hear your excuses. You're both guilty, and now you're both going to deal with the fallout. MIA turned to me, tears streaming down her face. Eric, please, can we talk about this? I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't mean to hurt me, I shouted, my voice echoing through the empty lobby. MIA, you lied to me 4 months. You manipulated me into agreeing to this open marriage so you could keep seeing him without feeling guilty. You knew exactly what you were doing. Jason looked between us, clearly uncomfortable, but I didn't care. This was between MIA and me now, and there was no escaping it. I should have walked away the moment you suggested this ridiculous idea, I continued, my voice shaking with rage. But instead, I stayed, hoping we could fix things, hoping you would realize what you were throwing away. And what did you do? You kept lying, kept sneaking around. MIA collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. I felt a brief flicker of sympathy, but it quickly disappeared, replaced by the overwhelming sense of betrayal that had been festering inside me for weeks. Jason cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of control. Eric, listen, I didn't mean for this to happen. MIA, she told me that things were bad between you two, that you were drifting apart. Don't, I said, cutting him off. Don't try to justify this. You both knew what you were doing, and now you have to live with the consequences. There was a heavy silence in the room, broken only by MIA's sobs. Jason stood there, frozen, unsure of what to say or do. Finally, I turned to MIA, my voice cold and steady. We're done, MIA. This marriage is over. She looked up at me, her face pale and tear-streaked. Eric, please, don't do this. We can fix this, we can. No, I said firmly, we can't. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the building, leaving MIA and Jason behind. I didn't look back. I couldn't. There was nothing left for me here, nothing left to salvage. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. It was over. The lies, the betrayal, the pain, it was all over. I had finally taken control of my life again, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. I drove away, the weight of the last few weeks slowly lifting from my shoulders. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again.